All right, everybody, so we will call to order the January 7th school committee meeting. Members present are Angela Goethals, Christy Walston, Tim Killam, Peter Nero, and Lori Wycall. Mike Ober will not be joining us this evening. And Peter, can we have some pledge allegiance?
Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Tim, could you read the mission statement, please?
To create an inspiring, challenging, and supportive environment where students are encouraged and assisted in reaching their highest potential.
Thank you. And first item we have is award of bid for AV services for Ride Stage 2 WPS capital improvements. Cindy, do you want to kick this off for Dr. Garstow?
Well, I'll be happy to. So this is rather timely, and we didn't feel it was prudent to put it off till the next meeting because our stage 2 application is due to ride for February 15th. So Deb Reading is joining us. Deb, for those who don't know, has been down with construction, our OPM, our owners project manager for the projects we have happening currently at the elementaries and some other work. And Justin Hopkins is joining us as well. Justin is, for those who don't know, is the chair of our building subcommittee. Has done a terrific job there. So they can both explain what we have here and kind of why we put it on this agenda to get this approved so we can move this forward again to have it in place for February 15th.
Right. RIDE gives us a very challenging schedule. We have to have our stage 1 submitted by September 15th. And then it can take however long it takes for them to come back with their approval. We can't do anything with stage 2 until we have that stage 1 approval. So that's what we did this time. We were able to get stage 1 approval with no comments, I should say. It was great, with no amendments to our plan. And then we had to go out to bid for architectural engineering services for the stage 2. The way we do it here in Westerly is we go out for qualification packages, then we review them. There's a subcommittee of myself and Mark and Eileen, who's the purchasing agent. We reviewed them, and then the highest scoring bidder is asked to give a price. We then negotiated with this authority and got it down to this price, which after speaking with everyone seems to be quite a good, market rate for bringing in an architect and engineer, especially with this expedited schedule now that they've got to have this substantial package together with their consultants for February 15th. So I think I outlined it here. I know I outlined it here to you that whatever is done over the next 5 years that is already included in this plan, we will receive 35% reimbursement. So, right.
Do you mind if I also thank you, Madam Chair, members of the school committee. For those of you who I've not met yet, my name is Justin Hopkins. I am the chair of the building subcommittee. So there are a couple of things that I think are important to consider. We are already spending money annually for capital improvements. The most recent investments have been on the order of, don't quote me on this, but between $1.5 and $2.5 million a year on annual capital requests. We do not have a current stage 2 application into RIDE. RIDE allows us to submit not a major buildings project, which is what the previous bonds, and that's what we're by charter managing now. However, they do allow capital improvements to be submitted. And if the rationale is that if we're spending this money anyway and being good stewards of our facilities, that we should enter this program with RIDE and be eligible for 35%, a minimum of 35% reimbursement for all of our expenditures. So one of the things that has happened recently is, we're doing, the district is doing capital improvements anyway, and some of the items that were not previously identified as being in a 5-year capital plan were ineligible for reimbursement. And some of the folks that have been on the school committee for a little bit longer, probably recognize those projects or that some of them have been items of discussion. So we felt that it would be proper to submit a stage 2 application to get us at least identify the potential projects in that 5-year plan. Doesn't mean that we have to pull the trigger on all of them, but it's better to overshoot or overestimate the amount of potential projects that we'll have that will give us some flexibility over the next 5 years to properly manage the CapEx funds. So that's just if not to belabor this conversation point, but I think one of the items that will be proper for the school committee to take up is a potential revision to our subcommittee charter. Right now, all of this work is outside of our original charter. Our charter was specific to the bond projects, which we're managing, and we're managing them well. Everything's under budget or within budget and on schedule. So because we're advisory to the school committee, it makes sense for the school committee to give some direction, either seat an independent building committee. We're certainly happy, and we have been over the last several years, just providing recommendations to the school committee on capital improvement projects that are coming up. Mark is, and John Pagano before him were members of the school building subcommittee, and we use that as the vehicle to vet projects and ultimately make recommendations to the school committee. That's technically not our job, and it would be nice to have some endorsement or some recommendation for the school committee. Whether it's a standing committee, right now we're ad hoc. If it's a standing committee, I would recommend making sure that we have, you set some terms, and you be part of the appointments process as you have been on the school building committee. But as we're still going to be managing the major bond project for the foreseeable future for at least the next 18 months. So we have been using the school building subcommittee as the vehicle to launch these capital projects, and that's why we have it at your door. We did get behind the sticks a little bit on the meeting schedule in terms of, we had limited meetings because of the Thanksgiving holiday and then the Christmas and New Year's holidays. So between that and the procurement schedule, this is why we're here in front of you now. Ideally, moving forward, we'll make sure that we have ample opportunity because it is an investment.
Anybody on the committee have any questions?
Well, it seems like they've only presented the top architect here, is that correct?
Well, those were the 3 that responded.
So the way, and this is another one of my projects, is to streamline the procurement process in town. It's a little rogues humor here with Mark. The way that the town of Westerly solicits professional fee proposals is a qualifications-based process. Under that process, you're not allowed to solicit fee proposals as part of that process. So you select the qualified firm, the highest scoring qualified firm, as Deb just mentioned, and then request a fee proposal and negotiate a fee proposal. Some districts do it differently. The town of Westerly does it this way.
Okay.
And there were only 3 responses, not only, so because I was glad to see 3, but it's a very specific request. There are architectural firms that do this and do this very well. And from speaking with Bruce report and so far, they're doing a wonderful job. They're already being a little proactive and getting very familiar with the schools and projects so that they're able to see by the time. And I have no doubt that they are.
I think Justin pretty much answered my question. I was kind of concerned about the fees and why we weren't seeing all 3 and they weren't present here in this report.
So as an architect, I love this process, but as an owner, I don't. And it's the way that we're doing business. So.
Are there capital projects that were started in the last 5-year capital period, but were ineligible for the reimbursement that can be bundled into this next capital project?
No, one of the, and, this was one of the obvious, the Fields, project was one that we anticipated we would be able to retroactively, apply the reimbursement. That is not the case. It wasn't part of so we historically were operating under the 2019. If you remember, we had a failed referendum, but we had an approved RIDE Stage 2 application. So within that group of projects, there was the major project, and then there were a series of capital improvements. Those were the ones that were eligible for reimbursement because they were under the Stage 2 application. And conventionally, you need to go through the RIDE review process, which entails schematic design, design development, and 60% construction documents. So there's 3 thresholds that you need to pass through RIDE in order to kind of be in the program. So we're kind of overloading the amount of eligible projects in order to give us as much flexibility as possible for which ones we want to work on.
So I got a lot of things to absorb as I'm new to the committee here, but Ted, you did our projects in North Stonington, the high school, Dunston, in the elementary school, which was renovated new. How closely aligned the Rhode Island process, RIDE process, go along with what we did with the DOS in Connecticut? Is it pretty much aligned in terms of the process?
I would say so, yes.
Okay.
I wasn't familiar with that project at the time,
Yeah.
but, yeah, I'd say it's very, very similar.
Okay.
So I do, professionally, I do a lot of school projects in Connecticut,
Yeah.
and the Office of Grants Administration
Mhm.
is a little bit of a tighter ship in terms of the review process. I
In
don't-
here or in Connecticut? Where is it tighter?
In Connecticut.
Connecticut.
I don't want to say that RIDE is the wild.
They don't
west,
pay on time, I
but,
can tell you that much, so they don't reimburse on time.
Well, that's always if anybody follows the Office of Grants Administration, DAS News,
I
over
know
the
it,
last
yeah.
several years,
People are going to jail.
there's certainly a lot of reasons for
Yeah.
them to be prudent and
Yeah.
conservative. RIDE, there's $2 billion in school construction that's going on in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
And the school building authority, as much as I love them all, they're a small office, and the reimbursement schedule is slightly different in Rhode Island. You submit reimbursement once a year when the project is complete. And that's typically June 30th. Projects need to be certified complete by June 30th, and then you start getting reimbursement.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Anybody else? Great, so, I think we need a motion here to accept, the recommendation that's been provided for us.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so Peter Nero and seconded by Tim Killen. Any further discussion? All right, thank you. And thank you for being here. Thank you.
Oh, we need to
We
vote.
didn't.
Oh.
Little thing.
All right, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, thank you. A little voting thing, it's tricky. Yeah, of course.
What was not part of the motion is the funding source. I was going to recommend the answer fund balance.
Okay. Do we need to vote on that separately?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we need a motion to, use fund balance towards, funding for the bid.
Correct.
Okay, just want to make sure I say it right. Right, so do we have?
Yes.
Yeah, we need.
What's the amount?
Yeah.
It would be the amount
What's the amount?
of $329,870.
I think it's down on,
Yeah. that was the page.
Yes, it'll be a
I'm
shot.
not sure it's in the motion now.
yeah, it's on the second one. If I can scroll back there.
Show what the current fund balance is.
You have to have them.
It's not, however, and I actually have it as part of the slide for our budget presentation. The unaudited fund balance after the committed fund balance for the 25 budget is $3,666,781. And that is in excess of the 5% of budget per policy by $690,063.
So do we have a motion to apply, fund balance to cover the 329,170?
So moved.
Christie, Ms.
Second.
Wilson, and second by Mr. Kellum. Thank you. And all members in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So our next item we have on the agenda is our 2025-26 budget work session strategy. So for this one, I think it's Cindy and Dr. So if we want to kick anything off for us, and then I'd love to
Sure.
hear from committee members, their thoughts on it as well.
Sure. So, obviously, the budget is, the adoption of the budget and the administration of the budget falls to the administration. But the adoption of the budget is one of the key functions of the school committee, in any school committee. The school committees hire a superintendent, they establish policy, and they adopt the budget. So one of the things, and one of the reasons I adopted the practice of really taking people through department by department in my previous district in Massachusetts was, it happened there, and to a lesser degree, it happened here. I never want to see people in the community say about a school committee, those people just rubber stamp the budget, they don't even know what the hell is doing. And that's pretty much verbatim what was said in Massachusetts. They don't even know what's in that budget. They don't know how to read it. And so it's for that reason that we want to set the table, talk you through all of the aspects of how the budget is really the financial part of everything we do, our improvement efforts, the delivery of services, and all of that. And over the next few weeks, bring in the different department heads that can speak with authority and detail and answer questions about curriculum materials or transportation costs or capital improvements and facilities maintenance, all of those things, so that you feel grounded. You might have some angst about the ask that'll be made of the town council, or you might have thoughts about what the ask should be, but we want you to understand what's in the budget and the whys behind it. So for as long as I do this work, this is not going forward. Why is this? Am I doing the wrong one? You just gonna do it, Ryan?
No, the first one is.
Okay, all right. So the budget is the money part. But it has to, everything we do, from my standpoint, has to begin and end with the student we want to graduate. And as we say all the time, that means a student who graduates from Westerly High School, college and career ready. Either one, wherever they want to go, they're set up for success. And whatever comes next is of their choosing. That's not it. That's not it. There we go. So the work, and you'll hear Steve talk about this, and he did just a couple of weeks ago, somewhat differently, but it's very much the same song. The work is the work, and it really, from my standpoint, always tends to fall into three buckets. We have to ensure that all of these gears are working in concert. And the buckets of work really are about strengthening core instruction, the instruction that all kids receive every day, and ensuring that we have the systems and supports in place to ensure that all kids are college and career ready when they leave us. We also are continually working, and the budget helps to drive this as well, to improve educator effectiveness through professional development and training, and also, frankly, attracting and retaining the very best people we can, and building leadership capacity. And then finally, we also have to always have our eye on maintaining organizational and fiscal efficiencies. We have to constantly be aware that, there might be better ways of doing things, or ways of organizing our buildings, or looking at when is it time to create a new special ed program as opposed to doing out of district placements, Or when is it time to issue an RFP for transportation services as opposed to doing it in-house? All of those things have to be considered. So when we talk about, for example, the first one, which is most near and dear to us, strengthening core instruction, this all takes money, but it's about ensuring that all kids have access to challenging, engaging, and relevant courses and content. We want to have a broad array, especially at a comprehensive high school with a growing CTE program that ensures that kids have access to that. We need to ensure that all of our kids and the teachers have access to high quality standards aligned curriculum materials, books, workbooks, all of those things that support teaching and learning. Providing an array of research-based interventions. This is when we're talking about what do we do for kids that have started to come off the rails. For about 85% of all of our kids, what we deliver works beautifully, but there are other kids who need that core instruction, they need that core, and they need more on top of that. So how do we have the interventions in place? How do we identify who those kids are, what they need, and who are the service providers to provide for those? And increasingly, we're infusing technology, current research around data-driven instructional approaches to ensure that all kids truly graduate from us prepared for whatever comes next, and that they get to choose their future. The green one about improving educator effectiveness, we need to be able to hire, and I know this came up at the first committee meeting, recruiting, hiring, training, and retaining the best teachers we can get our hands on, and leaders. Implementing comprehensive educator induction models so that when they come to us, if we're able to land high quality teachers, last thing we want to do is throw them to the wolves. We have to have programs in place that support them as they become part of our team and they continue to grow their expertise. We want to be really clear about our expectations for all of our staff. And we want to leverage educator evaluation and coaching and other lever points to continually grow the capacity of our teachers to be the very best teachers they can be in front of the classroom, and our building leaders to be the best they can be. And then organizational efficiencies. Again, it could be anything from schedules to budgets to how we do things, but making sure that everything we do, all of our policies, our practices, our procedures, make sense. We don't want to hear that, well, this is just the way we've always done it. There are oftentimes better ways to do things that are more effective and more efficient. We want to be seeking those out. So where necessary, that includes redesigning, restructuring, reimagining our school schedules. If our schedules are the impediment to getting our kids what we need to be focused on that. Sometimes that work involves a lot of people and organizational charts have to reflect that. So that is the work, whether it's in that red gear, that green gear, or that blue gear. It's about improving instruction, growing capacity, and making sure that we're as lean and clean an educational machine as we can be. The clear path forward, Steve spoke to a couple weeks ago, but I'll let you take these couple of slides if you want to.
Sure. I just wanted to piggyback on the 3 years, but also to bring you back to before the holidays about the work that we're doing, about identifying the bright spots and expanding the work that's happening in those bright spots out and scaling it out. And what does that look like? What type of assessment data? It's all grounded in data. And especially with the implementation of the HQIM across ELA, math, and then science is coming through. It's a lot of work on the teachers, and it requires a lot of professional learning, coaching, and so forth. So just want to acknowledge that work that we ground ourselves in that as we kind of think about the budget and so forth. And then thinking about where we've identified those gaps that we need to close across the schools. And again, grounded in data and, investigate like where we can make moves and close gaps, whether it's providing more intensive professional learning for teachers, working with interventionists to identify students and providing the right interventions,
So at the end of the day, any budget, whether it's the school district's budget or the town's budget, they're value statements, right? Any spending levels, all allocations, the resources, they're reflective of the value judgments made by the school committee on behalf of the community they represent. Whether, whatever your priorities are, whether it's having the highest paid teachers in the state, or the smallest class sizes, or the the highest results, you're gonna put your money behind that. It's gonna be reflective of what you value, what's important. So in Westerly, there are a lot of things that we do, and do very well. And if we want to continue to provide for rich, robust, and comprehensive programming, including high-quality core instruction and electives, continuing to grow our career and technical education programs, we have a foreign language department here that's second to none. Music, art, if all of these things are still important to us, our budget will reflect that. Our special ed programming is increasingly strong. If that's a priority for us, our budget will reflect that. If the district wants to, cut back to, the bare minimums, budget will reflect that. So in terms of context, who's the Westerly Public Schools at this point? We serve 2,107 kids in pre-K through 12. We have 18 students who are WPS eligible. They live in the community, but they attend charter schools. We have 96 WPS eligible students who are homeschooled. 69 of our kids attend the vocational programs at Charahoe. It used to be just a few years ago that vocational centers, Charahoe was one, were really the only show in town. But increasingly, we're offering programming that is resulting in kids staying here and having that programming here. So we don't want to see a kid leave and go to Charahoe for cosmetology, for example, when we have an outstanding program here. There's no reason to. We want them to be bulldogs for life. We have 3 kids who do attend vocational programs in other districts. We can't offer every vocational program. We can't train kids to be dental hygienists yet. We don't have marine mechanics, which I would love to have, but we can't have everything yet. We have 1 student who's in an alt placement. We have 9 who are in the transition program. Transition is for students, special education students aged 18 to 22. They are still our responsibility, and they are in an outstanding program that's down next to Town Hall. We have 2 students who are in private schools, and if a Westerly kid goes to a private school that needs IEP services, that's still our responsibility. We're on the dime for that. We have 4 preschool drive-in speech students, and we have 9 students currently earning their GEDs. We operate our own transportation department. Not too many districts in the state do. We run 17 buses, full-size buses and 2 minibuses assigned to 113 morning and afternoon routes. And there are also 22 morning and afternoon out-of-district minivan bus routes run per day. Increasingly, we're having to, if we do have to send a special education student to an out-of-district placement, because much like CTE, we can't offer everything. As comprehensive and as strong as our special ed programming is, there are some kids whose needs we can't meet here in the zip code. When we have to send those kids out, we have to provide transportation for them as well. So that's part of what we do. Increasingly, though, we're also seeing kids who are homeless or live in other districts, and the state determines that their best bet is to attend the Westerly Public Schools. We're responsible for transporting those kids. So we could have a kid that lives in Princeton or Providence, and a judge says this child should be attending at Westerly. We have to transport the kid down here. Or a kid's living in Westerly, and a judge says this child should be attending in Warwick. We have to transport that child.
Can I ask a question about the slide?
Yeah.
Can I just, back on the numbers, just curious, is the 2107 students that are in Westerly in our schools, or is that 250 or so that are outside subtracted from the 2107 for the students that are actually in our schools?
Well, the 21, the easiest way to probably look at it is the 2107 is the numbers of kids we're responsible for.
Okay.
Right, and those are the kids, if they're 9 GED kids,
Yeah.
they're not currently on campus, but they're still our responsibility.
Okay.
So one of the things that that you will hear about and we hear about, and people in the community that don't really understand the budget or what's been happening, is the district is experiencing declining enrollment, and they have not right-sized their staffing to reflect that. They haven't made the cuts and the adjustments as enrollment has declined. Westerly has seen declining enrollment since at least 2020, so almost 25 years, the numbers have been coming down. Increasingly, as there's less and less available affordable housing in the community, and families can't afford to move into the community, and for other reasons, the enrollment continues to decline. But we have made adjustments. And would it be ideal that through attrition, the district staffing would be right-sized along with the number of kids coming down? Sure, that'd be great, but it doesn't always work that cleanly by any means. So, we have reductions for this year, and the most recent, 16.51 FTEs, full-time equivalent positions. That's for the year we're currently in. That included building assistants, behavioral specialists, bus monitors, bus drivers, dean of teaching and learning, English language arts teachers, grade 6 teachers, a librarian at the elementary level. We went from having a librarian at every elementary building to sharing 2 over 3 buildings, a 0.8 math teacher at the high school, a reading specialist, a social studies teacher, half a special education teacher, a technology teacher. So that's just for this year. That's 16.51 reductions, but you'll see additionals. And I should say too, there are reductions and then there's net reductions. Because as we go through the budget and we try and figure out what the district's priorities are, many times we'll be in a position we'll say, all right, we're gonna reduce these positions here, but we really need these additional ones. So where I could say we reduced 3 FTEs, but we added a social worker, the net is, we had 2 positions still there.
Dr. President,
That came out, yes.
so back to the other slide, just so we're clear, that does not include the positions that were funded with fund balances currently.
No, we're
Correct?
gonna get that.
Okay.
So that's another challenge that the committee's gonna have to figure out how we want to address, but we will discuss that.
And so that is what you're saying that you want to cut this year?
No.
No, this is for the year we're working in. These were reductions that were made basically at this time last year.
Okay.
For this year. So it's 16.5 positions, 16.51 positions for this year. And this is where the net thing comes in, right? So in order to save money, we added a director of facilities. How does that save money? Well, under the previous arrangement, we had a contract with Aramark who would provide for us somebody like a Mark McKinnon, a facilities director, and they would provide some chemicals and they would provide some training in that. But we found that it was going to be more cost effective for us to have our own person. And particularly when we had John Pagano a few years ago, who was just outstanding, was the best facilities director I've ever worked with. And then he worked with Mark, and Mark is doing an outstanding job as well. It made sense for us to have our own director, cancel that contract with Aramark. So we added a position, but we saved money. It was like $250 a year to have that contract with Aramark. Now we're just paying the director of facilities position. So it may look like we added something, but we added and we saved at the same time. We have a HR generalist. HR is increasingly, legalistic and can be a challenge. We need some cross training there. We need some backup. So we added that position. We have math interventionists. For years, schools, especially elementary schools, have had reading specialists that work with kids at tier 2 and tier 3, kids who are not being successful in a general classroom. We are finding the need to have the same kind of approaches to mathematics, and they're paying huge dividends. We had paraprofessionals. Typically, paraprofessionals are provided through the IEP process, the individual education program process for special education students, but we also provide paraprofessionals at K level, and we assign them to our pre-K classes as well. We added a half a social worker. Mental health supports is increasingly a need, and we added a student success coach. So some of the changes, we talked about 2025. The net decrease after all that was a decrease of 8.01 positions for this year. But you can see for fiscal year 24, we had 8.04 reduction. Prior to that, 2.98, 5.31. In FY 21, we had a decrease of over 26 positions. In 2020, 16 positions. In 19, 9.55 positions. So the net decrease over the last few years, at least in my tenure, has been over 76 positions. And again, they came from aides, monitors, drivers, administrators, teachers, all levels. And we have made significant reductions and we continue to. It's about being, again, as lean as we can be. Proposed staffing changes for fiscal year 26, where we are. These are those positions that you were just asking about. We had some classroom closures that we had proposed for last year, and there were 5 of them. And at the 11th hour, because it was a priority for the committee voted to use fund balance to put those positions back into our buildings. They didn't put them into the budget, though. They used fund balance to ensure that those positions continue to exist. So the challenge with that is that fund balance typically makes the most sense with one-time expenses like you just voted to do on the awarding of that contract for the preparation of our stage 2 application, or a roofing job, or to buy a bus or something. When you use fund balance and the next year that money's not there, how do you pay for it? You have to build it into the operating budget, and that's when you see significant spikes. So we have to figure out how we address that going forward. There was the reduction of a paraprofessional, the dean of students, and technology teacher for next year. We have some retirements that we intend not to refill. And again, it's the cleanest way if we can make that happen. If people retire as enrollment declines, beautiful, but it's not keeping pace. Additions, we're looking for an instructional coach, one custodian, special education teacher, two student success coaches, in part to make up for the fact that we're not filling a dean position, and a 0.71 building assistant. Building assistants are like paraprofessionals, but they're kind of just assigned to the building, work in the offices, support the functions of the building. So I'll turn it over to Cindy for the next few slides here.
So this slide, this is our current year revenue and expense summary. You can see actuals from 21 through 23, the adopted budget from 24, and then the change for fiscal year 25. So our budget increase was only a 0.78% increase. However, you'll note that our local appropriation, that's the top line, that's the town aid, was level funded. We had a slight potential increase in tuitions, some miscellaneous revenue, and the fund balance that was brought into the budget to fund those 5 teaching positions at almost $420,000. So looking at our committee.
Question, my eyes are kind of straining, so can you send this along to us so that we can, copy of this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and this is also part of our budget book that
Okay,
I can upload as well.
thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah, we also, Mr. Nero, keep all these documents in a folder on the drive. You can also use those at any time.
So with the budgeting of fund balance in fiscal year 25, prior to that, just to note, the last time the district operating budget utilized fund balance was in fiscal year 17. So since then, I just wanted to give you a history of, since from 2018 through 25, what the committee has used fund balance for. So in 2018, we used $255,000 for the cosmetology renovation. That was moving. Cosmetology used to be located at Tower Street. It is now right down the hall here. Nothing in 2019. And fiscal year 20, the committee awarded $1.4 million for maintenance. And that's when we established our own district fund for maintenance versus historically our capital projects we do submit to the town every year and are awarded capital through the town. Again, no award in 21. In 22, a couple of small commitments for some OPM services and a budget overage for buses. In fiscal year 23, 1.2 million for maintenance, and that commitment included the turf field, the 500,000 for the field project work, and the 31,500 for the design work. In fiscal year 24, the committee allocated 1.8 million for the school building projects. And then in fiscal year 25, the 419,000 for the operating budget.
So if you could just go back for 1 second, Cindy.
Mhm.
So the point, an important point here is, so if you look at like, FY 2020, the 1.4. Every year, every fall, we submit to the town our capital request. And then our hope is that during the budget process, the town manager and the, town council will determine to fund the requests that we made, that they'll give us the money to do the capital projects that we need to do around here. But we never quite know if it's gonna be approved or if it's not. So you take that issue combined with another perception in town, and I think I may have said this to you previously, but there was a real sentiment in town among many people when we were pursuing the bond, for example. Why would we give them more money? They don't take care of what they have. We've heard that like ad nauseum. Well, you take those couple of factors, and then the fact that we had people like John Pagano and Mark McKinnon, high quality people that can get jobs banged out. And it made sense to take some fund balance, give it to Mr. Pagano and say, John, take care of these things, these 5 projects that you've identified that we were hoping the town would pay for, but we don't know, or they've already declined, and get them done. So we've worked really hard to address the capital needs of the buildings. I worked around with Mr. Nero a couple weeks ago. I mean, the buildings, as old as they are, look terrific. And a lot of times it's ceiling tiles, it's plumbing work, it's bigger projects, and a lot of times it's just a lot of paint and cleaning. But you go and see his old building, Dunn's, as old as it is, it's rock solid and glistens. And so I think we've done a great job addressing that they don't take care of what they have issue. And it's a perfect use of fund balance. So, you know, one of the things we're thinking about lately is, yes, I get that there are counselors on the town council that say, but they're running these surpluses and that money's going into fund balance. But we are putting those monies to good use. And so I think the process of making capital requests in the fall needs to continue. We wish the town would fund them fully, but they don't, frankly. And we are able to use monies that would have otherwise, been spent at the end of the fiscal year in order to come in with no surplus to address things that we need to do. In some districts, in many districts, in previous districts that Mr. Nero and I are familiar with, it comes to be May, June, and you suddenly get an email from the superintendent that says, spend. Spend it down and buy a bunch of stuff, whether you need it or not. And that's when you end up with rooms this size filled with copy paper and all kinds of other things because you want to come in with no surplus whatsoever. We think this is a much more prudent approach to buy what we need, try to fill the positions that we budgeted for, that we know we need, and then what's left over, if it goes into fund balance and we use it for capital projects, I think it makes a heck of a lot of sense. As I told the committee previously, and I know it sounds silly to some people, but $1 million is not a whole lot of money anymore when it comes to running a district. And so if we budget, $500,000 or $750,000 for snow plowing, for example, and it doesn't snow all winter, that's money that doesn't get spent. If we budget for positions that we absolutely believe we need, we can't fill them, that's money that doesn't get spent. Those little pockets of money adds up pretty quickly. And again, we could blow through it at the end of the year and nobody would be able to say they don't spend what we give them, but it doesn't make sense. So when we have surplus, we put it into fund balance and we've used it for one-time expenses to great effect. And that's my soapbox about that.
So is the 3,070,070, that's what we currently have in our fund balance?
No, that's what's remaining from the funds that were committed. So you can see, for example, cosmetology, the 255 remaining 0, we spent that.
Yeah.
So that's what has not been spent yet. So we did not use the OPM funds or the bus overage funds. The 114 still remains. Out of the 1.2 million committed in fiscal year 23, we have 666,000 remaining.
Gotcha.
We still have the 1.8 because that's towards the building project that will be applied at the end.
Okay.
And then fiscal year 25, that will be applied at this year's end for the budget.
Okay.
So technically, all those amounts should be deducted from the 3 million, is that what you're saying?
No, these are committed. So these are committed fund balance. This is, in this slide, this is our unassigned fund balance. So the unassigned fund balance, this is where the school, per school committee policy, any fund balance below 2.5% of the operating budget, we need a plan to bring that back up. Anything over 5%, the committee should be using for other one-time purchases.
And so that 600 obviously isn't for what we approved today.
So that the 329 approved today will reduce that 690.
To 360 and 193.
All right, so our unassigned audited fund balance at the end of fiscal year 23 was 4.8 million. Then I subtract out the 24 and 25 commitments,
Okay.
which were the 1.8 for the building and then the 419 for the budget. Plus our estimated increase for fiscal year 24 of 1.1 million. That 1.1 million represents a general fund surplus of 877,000. And the difference is our prepaid expenditures reduce our unassigned fund balance. So it's the change in those two over the year for the audit. So that would bring our unassigned fund balance to $3,666,781, which is 6% of the operating budget. So that difference, that 1% is the $690,063. So the school committee, the per policy, the over 5%, that 690,000 should be utilized. However, it does not prohibit the committee from utilizing more fund balance if needed. It's not below the 2.5%. So it's looking at that unassigned fund balance and saying, what do we really want to maintain? Just in case one year instead of a surplus, if we go the other way, say we have 10 high-class students move into districts. This has happened in other districts. Not here to this point, but it could potentially happen. So, and this slide, this is just to show you a history of our overall budget, the local appropriation, state aid, and within that state aid, a portion of that is high cost special ed. So if you look at our total budget, you can see in 2019, we had a 3.1% increase. My note there is in 2019, our health insurance rates increased by 24%. So in that year, our overall budget increase of $1.7 million, 1.3 million of that was for health insurance alone. And you can see also in that year, our local appropriation increased by $1.8 million. And we had requested 2.5. Our state aid at 8.7 was only a small decrease. And out of that 8.7, we received 198,000 in high cost special ed. So in fiscal year 20, you can see only a 1.53% increase. Pretty much funded by the local appropriation. The state aid, the $8,098,000, that was we budgeted $552,000 more than that. However, when we received our first installment of ESSER funding, the state removed that amount of funding from our aid.
So I think by statute, then the town would have to pitch in the rest of that money, because I went through this once in my career in Cranston. If the state does not fund you as they should, it is the responsibility of the town to fund, because it's technically a grant. So just throwing that out there, so.
So what,
Because I ended up in a beef with the mayor, and the lawyer said, yeah, we have to do this. It was back in, I think, 2010 or 11, when the state did, the governor at the time, Cherry, said, we're not gonna give you a state aid for the month of June, which was almost $1 million for us. And 2 years later, they said, no, you gotta give them the money. So just putting that out there, so.
so just a couple of things. If the district had a zero fund balance and we ran at a deficit in 1 year, and it could be state aid or any other reasons,
Yeah.
the town would have to
Yeah.
cover that either with their fund balance. If they did not have that available, it would be a supplemental tax bill. As far as the local appropriation awarded to us from the town on an annual basis, there is a legal requirement for maintenance of effort.
Yeah.
However, there is a mechanism where the town could seek to reduce our appropriation due to a decrease in enrollment. Fiscal year 21, you'll see we had a budget decrease. This was also the year we had the most significant decrease in FTE. In fiscal year 21, that's when Tower Street was removed from the budget. And you can see, our local appropriation was level funded that year. I believe Tower Street, that was actually a suggestion of the council during budget deliberations. In fiscal year 22, very slight increase to the budget. We did receive an increase in our local appropriation of $600,000. In order to receive that, we reduced our capital request by $600,000 with the intent of funding HVAC projects with our ESSER funding, which we did. And you'll see in that year, we did have a significant decrease in state aid. Fiscal year 23, level funded. We did receive an increase in our state aid. Fiscal year 24, level funded again with the local appropriation. And you'll see our increase in state aid, but if you look, that was due to the high cost of special education piece of the formula. The other part of our aid was reduced due to enrollment. The funding formula, which we'll get into at a future budget meeting, has had some changes over the years. We were also held harmless on some enrollment numbers during COVID. Which leads us to this fiscal year. We have a state aid decrease of $2,857. But our increase in high cost special ed was $382,000. And I apologize, my top right number I need to update for that budget.
So is there a breakdown that specifies what the high cost of special education categories are?
Yeah, so that is the high cost special ed is based on a report that's provided by People Personnel every year. It's based on the cost per individual student that exceeds a certain threshold. And then a certain percentage of that is paid back as part of our state aid. It's just for some history. Now, the next slides, I'm just going to go through some of our other funding sources that we've had. This is just an update to all of our CARES Act funding, so all of our ESSER funds have now been fully expended and reported. Ending with ESSER 3, you'll see there we were awarded 4.5, which we were projected to fully expend. However, we did only spend 4.3 million due to the timing and restrictions in the grant. However, we were able to provide, I think it was $1.9 million of HVAC work in this building, which was just completed maybe 3 weeks ago, and we had till the end of December to complete the project to be awarded the funds. So all of the ESSER funding that has supported staffing HVAC projects throughout all these years is now complete. Other funding sources. So our 2025 federal grant allocations, these are passed through federal grants through RIDE. We have Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV. So these fund reading specialists, training, curriculum, other items. RIDE Part B, the 1.4 million, this is special education. So this funds paraprofessionals, an assistant director, other positions. Special education preschool, 33,000. Funds a 0.5 FTE preschool teacher and some additional technology or furniture for preschool. What's important to note about these grants is, now I hear the term supplement, not supplant, is a provision for these grants. So this is above and beyond your general operating budget. So we can't, during this process, we can't say, well, we want to, add another math interventionist and we'll just, or we want to pay for this math interventionist out of Title I. Let's take it out of the general fund budget so we can come in, at a lower percentage. For example, in Title I, we have 2 reading specialists, one for State Street and one for Springbrook. In our general operating budget, we have 1 reading specialist at each elementary. So the 2 funded by Title I are above and beyond. So we can't say, well, Dunn's Corners only has 1, so in our operating budget, we're going to reduce the reading specialist at State Street and Springbrook because we have 2 funded with Title I. Title I will come back and say, you are supplanting, not supplementing. That's not allowed. You can see here, we do receive a variety of funding for our CTE programs. The first of which, categorical funding from the state. This is for our approved programs, and it is specific by CTE program. The same with our Perkins funding, and then some small other CTE reserve programs. So this pays for some part-time paraprofessionals in those programs, and Med Pathways assistant, a criminal justice assistant. Also, a lot of like our culinary equipment, vehicles for those programs, that comes from this funding. Those are items you won't see in the operating budget or request for, because this is the funding that's utilized for that. The next RIDE are MLL, multi-language learner categorical funding. This is now going forward. This is actually included in our regular funding formula aid. However, you will not see this dollar amount in the general fund budget. It's accounted for in a separate fund. Our Project Aware grant, which I believe after this year, there is 1 more year about that, for that one. Child Opportunity Zone. Ride instructional coaching, that is new for this year. That's to fund two coaches at the elementary level,
Yes.
I believe, right?
One is
Keith?
at the elementary for, Mrs. Leach, who is working with, first, second, and third grade teachers, new teachers, with teachers based on data, on, coaching teachers and forming their skills groups and so forth, modeling lessons, etc. The other half was for a middle school math coach, but we were unable to fill that position. And the state, the districts that were awarded a math coach, many of them were unable to fill that position because there's not many of those teachers out there. So they are allowing us to use some of that money to extend an existing contract with coaching. So we're looking, since we're already working with School Pit in math coaching, we're looking on gaining more time with them with that money. So
School Kid is a vendor that provides very high quality coaching and professional development. They've been excellent. So the ability to use those funds to support that work has been great.
Right, and so for right now, this is just a fiscal year 2025 grant. So the instructional coach position that we have is something that we would like to continue. So it is a potential addition to the general fund budget. However, we are looking at other grants that could potentially fund that position. So we would not have to add it to the general fund budget. We always try to look at our other current grant funding and how those allocations work and any potential grants that we could apply for before we look to add to the general fund budget. And then, as you know, the Parents as Teacher grant, this is now a grant and also fee for service with Medicaid. This is the program that has been running at a loss that within the next month or two, I will be giving the school committee an updated report as to where we are. It is starting to turn around a little bit. The reimbursements are coming in, so we should have a better idea of the funding for this program. This was a Tower Street grant that the committee chose to continue. When we vacated Tower Street, this was one of the programs that we said it's very valuable, we'd like to continue. However, we need to review the fiscal viability of the program going forward. And then just to note that typically we go through the general fund operating budget. I provide quarterly reports on the operating budget. We don't really talk much about other funds. So just to point out, other funds, we do have our lunch fund for our National School Lunch Program. Airmark is our food service vendor. The high school has a student activity fund that they manage. Athletics do have a fund. Every year our fees that we receive for games, anything after $5,000 goes to the athletic fund. The first $5,000 goes to the town. That's been the case for many years. I'm not sure why, but it's part of the budget. So the first $5,000 goes to the town and the rest goes to the athletic fund. And the athletic director will use that fund to buy different sports equipment for the gym. However, prior to that, he will seek donations. As you know, we did just receive a significant one from the Ocean House for athletic equipment. He also received a grant and received a golf cart. But when there are no grant opportunities or donations and something is needed, that's the fund that he can go to for that. And there's approximately $80,000 in that fund. We do have a separate fund for all of our donations. This could be one-time donations of $300 or $10,000 that we manage that are separate because those are restricted. And then we also have funds for other grants, the Rhode Island Foundation, Westerly Education Endowment Fund, those type of grants. So above and beyond the operating budget.
So there's only so many funding sources that come in, right? The majority comes from local appropriations. We get money from the state. We get those federal monies that Cindy talked about, from the titles, that rides us for the pass through. And then we've obviously had grants in recent years, related to the pandemic, but that has all gone. So the biggest drivers in any school budget are staffing and contractual obligations. We have about 270 teachers full-time. Currently, we need to keep in mind that we're in the last year of their contract. The WCA contract expires in 8/31, so we'll be going to the negotiations. Critical to attracting and retaining the best people we can get is being competitive in that. We do pay tuitions, CTE tuitions, again, fewer each year now, to surrounding districts. Special education tuitions can be a moving target. As Cindy alluded to, we could have a student come in with very, very high needs, just move into the neighborhood, and suddenly they're our responsibility, and we welcome them. It comes with a cost. Health insurance benefits, we've had some years where we've had minimal increases, and we've had years where we've had them as high as 24% increases. So another moving target. Supplies and materials, transportation costs, utilities, facilities and maintenance. It is now law that 3% of our budget be dedicated to facility maintenance and capital projects. We are in excess of that now, so that's not a concern for us. There are known unknowns, out of district determinations. There could be a kid in one of our buildings today that is in the IEP process, and by the end of the month, it's determined that they have very significant needs that we can't meet, and that child is to be sent to an out of district placement. We don't know when those things are going to happen. They occur through the year, or again, a kid moves into the neighborhood. CTE enrollment tuitions, we have students now that attend Chariho, live in Chariho, and just before Christmas this happened, student lives in Richmond or Hopkinton, I don't know which, but attends Chariho, is in their program, moves to Westerly, wants to remain in the program in Chariho, they're on our dime now, and it happens. Health insurance costs do fluctuate, estimated 5%, really? But we need to update that one.
Nope, I need to, didn't update there. That needs to update, I apologize. That was for fiscal year 25. I anticipated a 5% increase. The increase was actually 7%. For 26, that could potentially be higher. It will not be 24%. It should never be 24% unless there are a series of catastrophic events. We should be increasing our working rates for insurance based on recommendations from West Bay, our consortium. As for those of you who are not aware, we are partially self-funded for insurance. So I work with West Bay when they come back with the increases, potential increases, what they recommend, we review that, what the fund balance is in the health fund, and we come to an agreement on what that increase should be. Because when West Bay comes to me and says, so I had budgeted a 5% increase, they were closer to 8. We looked at the numbers, we agreed upon 7. If I said, no, I just want to go with the 5%, then that additional 2% would start catching up with us. And that's how you ended up in 2019 with a 24%. So we try to avoid that. However, due to costs, I can definitely say we will be at least another 7% increase, if not more, for 2026.
So are they raising it every single year?
So it's based on our claims.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have a stop loss for high claims, but we do have high utilization and high costs.
I've seen it go up with my business every year. We just got 10.6. It's brutal.
We try to avoid any increases, however,
Business.
due to cost utilization, it does go up. We do receive not every year, but we will be receiving again a dividend from West Bay, and whether it's $50,000 or $100,000. What we have done, at least since Dr. Garceau has been here, is we put that dividend money back into the health fund balance to help offset those increases.
And so another point I want to make, because I don't know if it's in one of the slides, one of the things that happens with our budget process too, and can contribute to surpluses, is we get anticipated state aid. In the spring, the Department of Ed will tell us how much we should anticipate from them as part of their contribution to our overall funding package. So again, remember, it's local aid, state aid, federal aid. But very often, well, all the time, the Rhode Island state budget isn't final until it is. And throughout the whole legislative process, the whole season, the budget is under revision, it's being reworked. And there have been instances in the last few years where we get good news in the summer, midsummer. You were told your state aid was going to be X, and now it's increased by $160,000. Well, that's at least a teaching position, maybe a teacher and a para. But the budget's already been established by the town council. Everything's already in the works. So additional money's coming to us from the state that we didn't anticipate when we made our budget pitch to the town manager and then the town council. So it's another factor that contributes to this kind of moving target scenario that we find ourselves in. The town collects taxes. They know what their expenses are. They don't really have the monies coming in from the state in the same way that we do. We don't have taxing authority, obviously. So it's another thing that's kind of, for lack of a better phrase, a moving target, special ed costs, state aid. We don't often know what it is until midsummer. And that's what happened this past summer, frankly. The committee again voted to use fund balance to put 5 additional positions back into buildings using fund balance. And then midsummer, we found out we had more state aid coming than we had anticipated. Not a huge amount of money, but it happens. So potential issues, items for considerations, things that we have to think about every year. Retirements. We have a lot of people, and healthcare is, these are tied together. We have a lot of people in our buildings, in our teaching force, that would be retired if not for the fact that they would not have health insurance if they left us. We have a lot of people who are open and saying they need to stick around until they're 65 so that they are eligible for health insurance. They would be gone. They're eligible to retire. They can't afford to retire. We haven't figured out a way to bridge that gap yet. We have offered early retirement incentives where, so say if and we can't do it by age, but the sake of conversation, we could say if you're a 62-year-old person, and your health insurance is $9,000 a year, well, what if I gave you $30,000 to walk away? You take care of your health insurance on your own, and that gets you to 65. We have tried those things, but it's not attractive enough. And we don't want to be in a position where we say to somebody who's 62, all right, well, listen, we'll cover your health insurance for the next 3 years. Because when the people start to get sick and need shoulder surgeries and those kinds of things, that's when everybody's rates would go up. So we haven't quite figured out a way to manage that, but that's statewide. And if the state could figure out an early retirement incentive that got people health insurance, that would be huge. Tuitions in both special education and CTE. We see those from time to time. Obviously, we want to see people coming in as opposed to going out. Building use fees, not big ticket items, but all the athletic leagues and theater groups and those. Some money comes in, miscellaneous revenue, not a lot. Outsourcing transportation services. When does it make sense from time to time to go out and check again? Does it make sense now to go to a vendor? It didn't 3 years ago. Should we check again? Should we check again? And we do that from time to time. Every few years, we'll issue an RFP, we'll look. And then when we have to consider that, there are horror stories with some of the transportation vendors. There were ones that I worked with in Massachusetts that I would never recommend we work with, but they work in Rhode Island. There's also the fact that our drivers are local folks, so we take that into account. We want to keep them working. And then this is a big one too. Special ed programming, as we know, we can't meet every kid's needs. We have kids with all kinds of needs. But sometimes you have enough kids that fit a particular profile where you say, you know what, rather than sending these 6 out, let's create a new program that are gonna meet the needs of this type of child or what they're experiencing, that profile. And we have done that. Because we would rather they, again, we want Bulldogs for life. We want to meet their needs here in the community if we possibly can. But sometimes it's just cost prohibitive. We can't do it. So where we start every year is I always tend to think in terms of level funded versus level service. And that people get confused about that as well. Level service would be if we opened in September of 2025 with everything we have in place now, if it was just same thing a year from now, that's going to cost more because teacher salaries increased, driver salaries increased, utilities increased, all of those things. That's level service, exactly what we have maintaining that. Level funding is the same dollars. So if you get the same dollars or less dollars going into a year, but your costs have gone up, now you've got a delta there. So we start with the principals, always pressing them. What is it you see coming up in the next year, the next 3 to 5 years that's going to be needed to really move the needle in your building? What are your district priorities, your building priorities? And if somebody comes to us and says, what I really need is an additional math teacher, my first question is, all right, well, then where are you getting that position from? What are you giving up? We try to really hold them to the line. And some people are like really excellent. Most of our people are really excellent about looking at that and say, well, I can free up this position. I don't really need this. Or we're going to close up this class and that'll pay for that position. That's a wash. And fine, that's a wash. We will try to make that happen, but recognize that in the spring, when the final budget is approved, I may come back to you and say, remember the thing we talked about? You can't have it. Sorry, we got to take it. But we press them and we press them hard. And we look for opportunities to reallocate resources, and only where we can't figure it out, and we've got very smart people, then do we make an ask for an increase. Capital expenditures, we've talked about this some. You know, in order to be eligible for 35% reimbursement, things have to appear on a capital plan. That's what you approved earlier, is the work to ensure that that is in place. And we have the town capital improvement process that I talked about earlier, where we make those submissions in the fall. We have bonding that requires a vote. We obviously are doing significant work at our elementary level that was paid for by a referendum that finally passed after 2 failed attempts. We have the operating budget where we could tap into operating funds from time to time, and we have district fund balance. And so that again speaks to the district policy of maintaining your policy, school committee policy of maintaining somewhere between 2.5 and 5% of the operating budget in fund balance. When we get north of that 5%, that's when we tend to look to, should we allocate this to a capital project? Should we move this to something else? Should we pay an OPM to prepare our stage 2 application? So our budget will always be driven by contractual obligations across all of our bargaining units. We have increased needs for students for a variety of reasons. We are trying to ensure that we have the instructional supplies and materials that we need, that our facilities are well maintained, that we're doing all of the things that we need to do to ensure college and career readiness for all of our kids. The budget always will reflect the realities of the end of the COVID-related supplemental funding, those ESSER monies that Cindy talked about earlier. We benefited from those for a few years, but those are gone. Decreases in state aid that are driven by declining enrollment, where during COVID we were held harmless. Those days are over. Now, if you have declining enrollment, like virtually every district in the state does, you're going to get less state aid. But at the same time, as we're getting less aid, we're seeing increasing needs for mental health supports and a variety of interventions. Some of it COVID driven, some of it driven by other factors. So again, this is kind of where we wrap up. The budget aligns with what we're trying to do from a strategic planning standpoint. It aligns with and supports ensuring that all of our kids and their teachers have everything they need to be successful, that we're leveraging all of the available resources to attract, retain, grow the very best professionals that we possibly can, that we're being smart about how we allocate our time, our resources, and our monies. It all comes back to ensuring that all of these three are working in tandem. And again, always, at the end of the day, it comes back to having a financial plan in place that supports the realization, the actualization of the student we want to graduate. That's what it's about for us. So I wouldn't expect an answer tonight, but over the coming weeks, as we go through these departments and you think through priorities of the committee and that, what would be helpful to us is some direction. Because we know there is appetite on the town council to level fund the district once again. There are also members of the town council and members of the committee, the community who do not think that that's logical, prudent, or the right way to go. But if the committee said to us, we want you to be as lean as you can and don't come to us with anything more than a 2.5% increase, and I'm just pulling that number out of the air, so be it. We will try and do that. If you said come to us with a level funded budget, we will make as many reductions as we possibly can and get as close to that as we possibly can. And then we present the budget to you. Then you vote it up, or you vote it down, or you make amendments. But we could use some guidance from you folks about how you see this proceeding. Typically what happens once we get the budget over to the town manager in March is he takes us as like one of his departments. We're like the police department. He takes all his departments, he looks at it and lays it all out, and he makes his recommendations to the town council. And in previous years, especially my first years, I would get summoned to town hall, usually on a Saturday morning, and be asked to defend the budget. And I would do my very best to do that and had some success, and had sometimes where we got level funded or it was recommended close Tower Street, those kinds of things. That what would be helpful is if I was the only one there on a Saturday morning making that pitch. And that's often how it was. It was me trying to convince the council to support the school committee's budget. So if the committee's not going to support the budget, we kind of need to know that. If the committee is going to support seeking an increase, we need to know that. If you're going to support an increase only to a certain level, that would be really helpful for us to know. But again, it's not for a conversation for tonight. It's just what you need to be thinking about. This is one of the most important things you folks do, is adopt the budget. And once you adopt it, my hope would just be that you get behind it and do whatever we can to prevail upon the town council to support and fund it. That's my pitch.
So I have a question regarding the teachers that were cut last year, the 5 positions that were taken out of the operating budget and funded by fund balance. How do we intend to put those teachers back into the operating budget?
That was my question to the school committee last year. I don't have an answer for that.
That'll be our decision.
That's something.
That happens.
Yeah.
In all honesty, if using fund balance to fund positions is not something at all that I would recommend. It's not something the city recommends, and we didn't recommend it last year. But that said, and I said it earlier, it'd be great if it just naturally happened through attrition that the district right-sized to meet the declining enrollment. If the committee decided that for the next couple of years, you wanted to continue with that practice of what the committee did last year, until things level out more and until we get more retirements and all of that, that's a decision you could make. You could decide to fund those same positions, or you could say, yes, we're still committed to fund balance, but to small class size, but we can see a small increase here. And just a small increase at this grade level across the district allows us to reduce one position. You could support that. So we're going to try and, recognize where we think responsible education decisions have been made and present a budget, but we want it to be one that you will support. So again, any guidance you can give us along the way would be helpful in that. We currently have classes with 12 to 13 kids in it. Is that great for the adult in the classroom? Probably. Is it maybe more important to have smaller class sizes than it was 5 or 6 years ago when the mental health situation was not like what it is now? Probably. But those are very small class sizes. Stonington, which gets great results, has I was just with the superintendent yesterday, 21, 22 kids in their K1 and 2 classrooms. And as I've said, and I just said this conversation with the president a couple of hours ago. While it might seem intuitive that you want smallest class sizes you can get, and you want as many teachers as you can get, you don't always need more teachers. You need more effective teachers. And so things that occur around the teacher, like having a coach, like having interventionists, like having paraprofessionals, all of those things contribute to making the teacher effective. And frankly, the union president and the vice president said, "Oh, I agree with that 100%." So it's a balancing act. You want to find the sweet spot between class sizes and all the other stuff you need around the classroom teacher to make this place tick the way it's supposed to.
And obviously, we're gonna listen to your recommendations, but, I think it is so important this year to hear from the principals to see if that's what they want, if that's what they need to run their building, because that didn't happen last year here.
Well, it did until it didn't. It was at the 11th hour when we, there was a change in the thinking of the committee. But so like an example is last year that we pressed the principals and the principals said, yeah, we value small class sizes, but we feel like we really need these math interventionists.
Mhm.
And myself and the assistant soup at the time would say, okay, well, what would your priority be? They said, we would rather have slightly larger class sizes and the math interventionists that we feel like we really need. Those things around the classroom teacher, like I was mentioned. So we built the math interventionists into the budget. But then the committee decided we want the math interventionists and smaller class sizes. So we will use fund balance to put in those positions that the superintendent recommended we remove. And that's your decision. It's just, it's not sound budgeting using fund balance to do that. Unless you decided, like I said, we're gonna do this for the next 3 years or the next 4 years only, or we're only gonna do it until we hit 2.5% in fund balance, and then that's that. If you want to try and preserve positions, you could go that route.
I mean, currently, right now, even with today's reductions, we would still have 360,193 that's left over, still above the 5% requirement that you guys were talking about.
That if we refunded those positions, just say we refunded those 5 positions, it was 419 this year, there's gonna be a salary increase, so it's gonna obviously be whatever that's gonna be, would drop us below that threshold.
It's really kicking the can down the road.
It is, yeah.
But if you said, we're only gonna kick the can for so far, for so long, and then but then that will be the ugly year. That will be the ugliest of ugly years.
Or could we,
Lori, did you have something?
So I'd like to know if we could see not just the number of students enrolled in each school by grade, but classroom size by school.
Oh, yeah.
Because my question is, like, at what point do we look at I have no idea. At what point do we look at Dunn's Corners has 3 second grade classes with 12 to 15 kids, but Springbrook has 3 classes that have 17, 18, and possibly redistricting who goes where?
Yeah.
And maybe if we knew, and I know that numbers fluctuate every year, but if we could kind of gauge it and maybe think, well, for this year, let's leave the teachers use the fund, I'm just throwing out hypotheticals, use the fund balance, but then know that we needed to restructure where the kids are coming from into each classroom and maybe be able to eliminate a teacher or a classroom in the school, but keep the numbers uniform across the board.
That's exactly the kind of thinking that we do, and those conversations that we'll have with the principals, exactly that. But another thing to keep in mind too is 17 kids at Springbrook might not be the same thing as 17 kids at Dunn's.
Depending on the
State
needs.
Street.
Right,
Yeah.
depending on the needs.
Gotcha.
So we don't necessarily need to have the exact same numbers across all the boards. We have to kind of keep in mind the needs of the particular buildings, but we'll be able to explain our thinking behind that for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think that was one of my questions was like the specific, all the schools and then the grades, how many for each class and each grade are there exactly?
Yeah, it's pretty much, 3 sections per grade level at the elementaries now. But from time to time, and you'll see, I'll make sure you have it next Wednesday, Rose will do an enrollment report. And what it'll tell you is, for example, at a school in grade 2, there are 45 kids and there are 3 teachers. Well, if you went to 2 teachers, that's only 22.5 kids. It sounds like a lot to some people. It doesn't sound to be a lot to people who've done this for a long time.
Well, then we also have to look at the contract. What are we allowed, I mean,
Yeah, we're never at cap. We never hit the contract cap.
Right.
Even for K through 2, I think the contract says 20.
Mhm.
I think the sweet spot is about 18, 16 to 18. But again, when you have 12, that's kind of hard to defend.
So have we ever redistricted here?
Not since I've,
Well, I would just tell you, it sounds really good, but you tell your kids that they're gonna be leaving one school with their friends to go to another one, and you're gonna have a real.
yeah, I think the last time it happened was when Bradford closed,
Yeah.
and that was right before Steve and I.
but
was
there's
leaving.
22, you pick.
Well, they're-
Oh my goodness, you're gonna love your new friends, right?
And I think we do want to, if we're gonna prioritize smaller class sizes, I think it has to be a K to 2. That's my, early childhood is, we need kids that are prepared for grade 3, that are reading and have their literacy together. And then the class sizes go up. I don't wanna see classes of 27, 28, 29. But, 24 in a 3rd grade, 4th grade classroom, that's not uncommon at all.
With the right supports.
Yeah, exactly. And the highest quality teaching that you can, get your hands on. That's it. The other thing about class size and the impact on kids is, and we've seen this, that we have some teachers in the district that will absolutely knock it out of the park, and they could do it with 30 kids in their classroom. And we have others who with far fewer numbers are not gonna be nearly as effective. It's just the nature of the beast. We try to grow their skill set, but class size is not the end all be all. It's just my.
Well, this was a lot today. I appreciate everything, and I'm kind of in agreement with Tim, and my practices, and you know that, has always been have the departments come and justify what they want and explain where they want to move their resources to, because I think that's going to be important, so.
Yeah, because I'm almost certain we're gonna end up level funded again. I mean,
And again,
just
that's.
opinion, I hope that's not the case, but.
So I would just ask of the committee, I think, to everybody's point here, obviously when we have the principals comes in and the
Yeah.
different leads, I would just want everybody to really, that's the time where we should be asking the questions, asking for the justification. So we don't get to a place where now we're at the end and we're going, oh, well, I don't know if they really needed that, and I don't know if it was important. Like, let's really ask good questions, come into it with understanding what they're saying. And then 2, to the point of, if we have to defend what we are asking for, at least then we can back it up and say, yeah, we heard, and these are the things that we support. This is what's important to us as a committee. So, I mean, I think we're in a great place. This was a really great overview for all of us to understand, where everything's coming from. And then that would really just be my ask of the group, that we really take the time now, so we're not scrambling to try and put things back.
And what we will do prior to, each meeting where we have different departments coming in, so the first one I think will probably be transportation and facilities. You will get their site budgets in advance of that meeting. So you have time to look through it and take your yellow highlighter or whatever, or brighten the margins and have your questions ready to go. Well, the transportation director will have Mark, McKinnon here, and just ask them anything, go right through it and know it. And then when the elementary principals come in, you'll get the site budgets in advance, same thing, you'll be prepared and grill them. They will be prepared. And if they're not, okay, I'll deal with it. They'll know what they're looking for in their budgets. And they are, they know what they need.
And so the goal is to meet with all of these before we meet back with the town council again, correct?
Right, so we go
That's
through
what
the
this
whole,
means.
yeah.
Right,
We go through each of those.
we will have the budget to you, sometime in February, like a full thing for your approval, your blessing, and then it would go to the town manager. And then we don't hear anything for maybe 5-6 weeks sometimes, while he's doing his stuff, and then it starts to go before the town council.
And the finance board. you can just-
And the finance.
The
too.
financial.
Are we gonna plan another joint meeting? Because I know that's not
I know,
historically
we
what's happening.
requested it, that is something that I know we had all talked about, because I do think, again, I think our last meeting actually was very productive in comparison to some others. So I feel like, we feel like we're in a good place to say, like, here are the things that we do need. And we have input from the committee, then definitely bring that back to them to do another meeting.
And I think what's important at the finance board level prior to the council, because the town manager submits his recommended budget, which includes the school district as a department, to the finance board, then the finance board makes a recommendation to the council. So if we could have a finance board recommendation that supports our budget, wherever we end up in that level funding, that may assist us with the council.
Okay.
But I do hope that, and we've just been talking about this in the last few days, I do hope there's a way for the council to start to understand that while, yes, we have finished the last few years with surpluses, they've gone into fund balance and we've used those to address capital needs. If we weren't doing that, we'd be looking to them to do it through the capital project process. So I think both have to still exist, but we've been able to get a lot of facilities work done using those monies in that way, as again, opposed to spending it all at the end of the year. So it looks like we have, we could play that game. It's a game when you do it that way. It doesn't make sense.
Can I say something about the joint meeting? I agree with what you said, Leslie, that you and I spoke over the summer about wanting to make that joint meeting more productive, and I do think it was, but I also think it's important for us as, a body, as a school committee, for everybody to understand that we all have our own voice, and every single one of our voices matters as much as anybody else's. And as much as, we do want to work together in terms of the betterment of the school district, we're not always going to agree on everything. And I think it's important that the communication in the joint meetings is, comes across that way more so than I felt that the chair and the vice chair at the last meeting took a lot of liberties of making it seem as though that was being spoken for us as a committee as a whole. And I disagree with, I'm a fiscal and a social conservative. A lot of people on the committee are fiscal and social liberals. So I disagreed with some of the points that were made at the meeting. And I didn't think that was the time for me to disagree or address those. But I do think that the way that we are conducting ourselves as a body at that meetings has to be a little bit more neutral and take into account all of the 7 different voices on this committee.
Yeah, no, I can absolutely agree with that. And I do think, and I would hope everybody here would feel comfortable enough that, like, if you do disagree with something, like, even with me, like, I like the opportunity to have that conversation. I think we can do it in a way where we don't have to have internal conflict amongst ourselves,
Like the meeting
but
last night.
we can say, that, yeah, I agree with this person's point, but you want to add something else. So, I think having those meetings, the goal is that it's a conversation between both bodies and everybody who's present, asking questions back and forth and having that dialogue and being able to voice your opinion if you disagree on something. So I have no problem with that, and I don't think anybody would do it. I would hope that we can all do that.
Can I ask a stupid question? I said, to Cindy, it's probably dumb, but our fund balance numbers are pretty public. I mean, everybody knows it. Is it the same on the town council side as their fund balance? I mean, is it available as far as, like, if we wanted to, because we're constantly getting criticized, at least, I watched last night's meeting about how much the district's always got this amount. Why should we give them more? What about them? Are they running in a decent sized surplus all the time? I'm just kind of curious.
Yes, and it is published. There's multiple schedules on fund balance in the annual audit report.
Okay.
I know that town council does receive some regular financial reports. However, I do know on the district side that I provide fund balance reports more frequently, as we've been committing it for other items.
Sure.
But it is available.
I mean, we were taking some pretty good heat, as far as us having it.
They've had significant surpluses.
And that was my.
He stated the town manager stated in the meeting that it's between 15% and 18%. And that's what a town budget should be in terms of surplus for borrowing power and everything else. The school district surplus really doesn't mean anything in terms of borrowing power unless we got under the 2.5%. But really, to be honest with you, the most important thing is what's the fund balance on the town side or the city side or wherever.
Right, with the bond ratings, in the past, I have been on some of those calls when the town has been rated. And one thing just to know too about budgeting fund balance, the rating agencies do not like to see that. However, budgeting 4 or 5 teachers in 1 year is not going to lower the town's bond rate.
Yeah.
And correctly so, as far as the school, with a minimum of 2.5%, the rating agencies see that, okay, if something catastrophic happens, the school has fund balance to cover it for that 1 year. They're not going back to the town.
Right.
And it's not going to affect the town fund balance.
Okay.
So it does help in that manner.
So I have a question because I noticed it's been brought up quite a few times and I kind of asked it before, but I don't think I really got a solid answer on it. We have $28,000 per student pupil going out on each student, correct? But then schools like Cherahoe have 22,000 per pupil, and yet their proficiency levels and scoring and these things are happening better than what we're doing. And so I'm kind of curious why for a neighboring district, there's a $6,000 difference in the cost per pupil.
A lot of it with respect to Chariho is the tuitions that they bring in. We do send some kids to their career and technical programs, but we're not the only district that does by any means. Those monies are coming in. It's fewer dollars that are being expended there. There are districts, and I had mentioned that before, there are districts north of us that spend significantly less than we or other districts do and get higher results. They're also serving entirely different populations.
In addition, they have the CALA, so students with significant behavioral needs through an IEP. They're students that take the state assessment, their scores go into a different school, not the Ashway school, not the Richmond Elementary School, not the Charlestown, not the middle school, goes to CALA, its own school. And if you look at them, they are actually at morning. So where all our kids go into our schools.
Count as our kids.
As our kids.
If we took our special ed pop and created our own school and those scores went there and they didn't count against Westerly High School, you'd see dramatically different percentages of admissions.
So what is the percentage of our special education amongst all of the schools?
Overall for district, we're like
Yeah.
at right 17 to 18% special ed. It's pretty aligned with like the rest of the state. I looked at it the other day. And even down for disability category, it's pretty aligned within the 12 percentage points. So we're pretty reflective of the state as a whole right now, demographic wise for special ed.
The 28,000 is basically an average number, right? I mean, so.
Like all things put in and then
Right, because I
divided.
mean, a special ed student could be 50,000, and
Yes.
then this one over here is
Yes.
15. So I
Especially
mean,
it could be 150,000.
right, so I mean, that 28,000 is not just each student, it's an
It's
average.
just the better.
And it's based on actual UColor data,
Yeah,
and it's for
Yeah.
all funds.
right.
So there's a lot of pieces that go in, but also other districts, like we receive Title I funding. So do other districts, some more than others. So
Because I noticed our numbers up there for the special education was like around $400,000 or so, wasn't it? When you were mentioning it
Oh,
earlier.
for ITA Part B,
Yeah.
1.4 for Part B, which is special education. And then it's like 33,000 for pre-K.
And there are, again, districts north of us that, in the accountability system where everything is broken out, you're looking at the performance of all kids, you're looking at the performance of kids with disabilities, kids with, multi-language learners. There are districts that have no multi-language learners. There are kids that have very small percentages of, special ed kids. There are districts that have very, very small percentages of students on free and reduced lunch. Ours is increasingly growing. And it's about 34% district-wide, but in some neighborhoods, it's in the 60% range.
Okay.
So it's a different animal.
Okay, I was just curious because I noticed that's been some of the complaints of the public has been, well, we're spending this much on each student and all the other districts are spending less and they're performing better. So I was just curious what the answer to that was.
Yeah.
So the answer is it's not a simple answer.
Yeah.
And we don't have the complete answer. One of the areas we're looking at, what RIDE has done with our uniform chart of accounts data is they have created and published dashboards on their website, which I can pull up at a future meeting and we can go through. So we can look at comparable districts and see where the spending is different.
Okay.
Now, what it won't tell you is classroom sizes, different FTEs. It's only by job class category, but there are some areas that we can certainly look at.
And it is a matter of numerators and denominators as well. This is a relatively small district. If we had far more students, those monies would be spread over more kids and the number would be lower. But as your population declines in a building, you still need a principal. You still need a superintendent, you still need a director of special education. So the number of students, while that is low, that drives up the amount of money being spread across. And as Tim said, it's an average, it's not for every kid.
Thank you.
We have a motion to adjourn?
So
Well, could we talk just for a moment about next meetings? Then you had some.
So just quickly for the school committee meeting is next Wednesday. So I don't have anything for budget at this point for that meeting. But the 21st, if staff are available, that's when I'd like to tentatively schedule transportation and facilities and including capital. And by the 21st, so I may be still working on a few line items, I'd like to have an overall draft budget to get an idea of where we are with the potential changes in staffing, other areas, health insurance. Because obviously the projections I had done for the joint budget meeting with the town council, we hadn't even met as an administration yet and discussed staffing or any other budget changes. So that was just taking the 2025 budget and adding contractual increases.
good.
So we'll plan on that for the next one, transportation and facilities. Right,
Assuming transportation are available.
right. And again, we'll get those the site budgets to you.
Okay, I agree.
Yeah, I do just want to say thank you. Tonight was my third budget, but this was very informative, very detailed. Thank you.
Great job.
And for the explanations.
Thank you very much.
Now,
Not less.
motion to adjourn?
Okay, so moved.
Wait a minute, yeah, move second. Okay, sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
See you later.
So-